Well, hello, my name is Sarah McCubbin. I'm from 10 Minute Momentum, and today I want to talk about how to use companion planting in your garden. And specifically, as we're talking about companion plants, which are friendly plants, how plants and people are alike, how we all have strengths that we can share with others. And I find that this is a really helpful concept to explain to our kids when we're trying to weave in life and the many different facets of how things are related. So I'm going to share my screen with you and then we will get started. Okay, so let's begin. We're going to talk about what is companion planting, the benefits of good companion plants, and also bad companion plants. How companion plants are like people, examples of companion plants, how to get started with this strategy, some projects you can do with your kids, and then the bonus resources that are included as well. So, first of all, before I get started, I want to say that I really look at companion planting as just another life skill as part of how growing food efficiently. I know this isn't something that's really popular necessarily. Like everyone doesn't have to grow their own food, but life skills are some of those tools that we learn just so we have a familiarity with it. So if you are trying to teach your kids life skills, teaching them how to grow food, even if you don't need to grow it, is a really great thing to do. Okay, so what is companion planting? Companion planting, if you've never heard of it, is a method of growing plants together that offer beneficial properties to the other plants around them. Sometimes one plant is primarily benefiting the others, but oftentimes there are benefits that go each way. Okay, so instead of planting a whole bed with one vegetable like tomatoes, you would instead choose to plant several different things in one bed. So you may have heard that tomatoes go really well with basil or with onions. So instead of planting just tomatoes in a bed, you might plant all three of those in the same space, kind of staggering them in there together. Well, both onions and basil have strong insect repelling qualities, which is why they are good when they're all planted together, because there are some pests that damage tomatoes. And when they're planted, with basil or onions, those will repel the damaging insects. It does not mean that you have to plant both of them. You could just do tomatoes and basil or tomatoes and onions. But oftentimes the benefits of companion plants are stronger when you use a few together in one bed and not just two. But two's better than none. Okay, so what are the benefits of companion planting? Because it's not just about insect damage. Here's some things that companion plants can do for other plants. They can share similar growing conditions. So that's helpful if you're just trying to find things that kind of need all the same nutrients, sun, soil conditions. They repel damaging insects. This is like a really huge benefit of good companion plants. They attract insect pollinators. So some vegetables need insects to pollinate them, squash are like this, in order to be more productive. So you want to use some companion plants in your garden that attract bees to your garden, that attract other insects to your garden that will pollinate your plants, if that's what you need. Some companion plants will repel rodents and other mammals like deer. There are actually some companion plants that will repel deer, which is a huge problem in some parts of the country. There are companion plants that have antifungal properties. There are companion plants that add nitrogen to the soil, like beans and peas. Some things are good companion plants simply because they use different layers of the soil, like beans and peas climb up, and there are other plants that go down. And so they're not really competing for space. Some are good companions simply because they provide a structure for plants to climb on. All right, bad companions. Some plants attract damaging insects. One plant family that is notorious for this are the brassicas. That's like broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, kale, like anything in that family. They attract all kinds of damaging insects. So you would not want to plant a whole bed of things from that plant family. You don't want to plant broccoli and cabbage and kale and all those in the same bed because they attract like cabbage moths and aphids and cabbage worms and like a whole bunch of stuff. They all attract that. So there'd be nothing to protect them. So that's common with some bad companions. Those are bad companions for each other. They might be good companions for other plants. Okay, bad companions might be prone to blights and other fungal diseases. And if you plant those with another plant that's prone, it increases, like these blights can spread from one plant to the other. Sometimes they're bad companions simply because they need so many nutrients. They're heavy feeders and they can strip your soil of nutrients. So it's better to kind of space those out or rotate your crops and not put all your plants together that need a ton of nutrients. Unless, of course, you're planting in a pile of manure, old manure or something, then it might be okay. Provide too much shade or crowd out other plants. So sometimes the plants could grow together, but they might shade the others out, or they might crowd them out. So that's what makes them a bad companion. And sometimes they just compete for space in the soil. Like a lot of times you don't want to put all these root crops together, like onions and carrots and potatoes and beets and everything all like that, because they're all, they don't take a lot of space above the soil, but they take up a lot of space below the soil. So those are the kinds of things that can cause something to be a bad companion. All right, now how are companion plants like people? Like, let's take a look here at this pyramid here on the left. I really like this because I think it kind of illustrates companion plants well. All of us are special, unique human beings, and we can contribute our gifts and abilities to other people and make them stronger if we know what we have to give, if we know what we're bringing to the table. But if we're insecure, if we're guarded, we don't know if we can help anyone, then we actually can't, right? So this pyramid is a good illustration because if the people at the bottom are strong, they are able to support the next layer, right? It reminds me of a support system. Like we as parents or as grandparents, we provide a support system to our children and grandchildren. And if our support system is strong, it helps make them strong and their life can be more stable. But if we're weak, or if we're inconsistent, or if we are always second guessing, things like that, it can be destabilizing. Like if that bottom layer of people is kind of weak and unstable and kind of tippy, they can make the next level the same way. They're not a strong support system. So I think this is a great reminder when I look at this. If we as individuals, as parents or grandparents, we can cause the lives of people around us to be stronger if we know our gifts and abilities and we share and give that to them. But at the same time, for our kids, and our kids have that same ability too with their peers and in their different environments. But if they make poor choices, or they're listening to bad advice, or they're getting into trouble or whatever, it can have a negative effect on their lives, the people around them. It can be destabilizing to a family. You see that happen sometimes where somebody starts getting into trouble. So this is just a great way to kind of talk to kids about the idea of companions, because companion plants do benefit or harm the ones that they are around. All right, here are some examples of companion plants, just in case you're trying to visualize this. So onions and alliums, that's like garlic and chives and shallots and, oh, there's so many. Green onions, there's many, many. These are all great companions for almost anything because they have strong odors that repel damaging insects. So I talked about brassicas, like broccoli and cabbage. You'd want to stick some garlic and onions in there with them because that repels those insects that damage them. Now, they aren't good companions to beans and asparagus because they can stunt their growth, but almost everything else. All right, another great companion is herbs. Most of us don't need a full bed of herbs, right? I don't need a full bed of lavender or a full bed of thyme, but I might need a whole little bit here and a little bit there, oregano, stuff like that. So herbs are great because they repel insects, mammals, lots of things. They also have flowers, many of them, so they attract pollinators. And many of them are perennials, which is awesome. Makes it so much easier because you don't have to replant them year after year. Okay, so, sorry. The last one is a famous example of companion plants, and that is called the Three Sisters, right? Native Americans supposedly taught this to the early settlers, and that is planting corn, beans, and squash together. And the reason we would do this is beans provide nitrogen to the soil, and they also climb up the corn. The squash and the corn use the nitrogen, and the squash also climbs the corn. So they're kind of symbiotic and they provide benefits to each other. Okay, how can we start with companion planting? Here's the steps I would take if I was starting. Pick 10 or less plants that you want to start with, right? Just make a list of what you like to plant in your garden. Pick 10 or less. There is, in the bonus resources, there is a chart that has all these plant families, the alliums, the brassicas, the, herbs. There's like 10 of them. And they tell you which ones generally plant well together, okay? Like nightshades and stuff like that. So once you have your list of plants that you're like, yes, these are my main plants that I want to grow this year, then pair them up in 2s and 3s using the chart in the bonus resources. Then do a little bit of quick research on Google because there are some outlier cases where it's like, these seem like they should be good together. It will only take you a few minutes if you put in like onions, companion plant, pumpkins, or something like that. You put in the 2 plants that you want a companion plant, see what pops up. If you find nothing, it's probably fine. Because usually what's going to pop up is like, yes, it's great, or it's terrible. And there's plenty that just don't pop up at all. So if they're on that chart, they're probably fine together, but just do a quick bit of research. Then you're going to want to make a garden plan. You can do this using a notebook where you draw out your garden, just sketch it out like bed 1, bed 2, bed 3, bed 4. I also have a garden planner available, and there's a link to it in the bonus resources. There's a coupon for 50% off. It's normally $7, would be $3.50. But anyway, you can do this with a notebook as well. So either way, it's fine. You map out your garden, then you're going to sketch out each bed. And for that sketch, it's helpful to have an idea. Is this 4x8? Is this 20x20? How much space are we talking about? Then you're going to plan what goes in each bed. Look back at those plants you wanted to use, right? And figure out what goes in each bed. It will help you know how many plants to buy or how many seeds to start if you do this. I mean, you can do this in the middle of winter. You don't have to have any seeds or dirt or anything to do this. Once you've planned what goes in each bed, make note of any special growing requirements or anything that you want to make sure you do. And then step 5, plant your garden, right? You can either start your seeds or you can plant, just buy plants. And again, using your plan, you're going to try and have 2 or 3 companion plants in each bed. And like I said, more can sometimes be better. A pretty safe thing to add to any bed to repel pests is herbs. Other than fennel, almost all herbs have some great pungent qualities that can help repel. You can border your garden with them, right? And there's some flowers too, like marigolds are great for this. Nasturtiums is another one that's great. All right. And the last thing, in your garden planner or in your notebook, you want to keep notes. And the reason for this is here it's 2023 right now when I'm recording this. And in next year, if you are trying to figure out what worked, what didn't work, I'm not sure. If you have a notebook or if you have a planner, then you can look back at your notes, think about what you planted and think about what worked or didn't. Like, did all your vegetables get eaten by bugs? Was that bed too dry? Do you need to add more fertilizer? Do you need to improve the soil? Like, what do you need to do next year? All right. These are some real simple companion plant projects with kids, right? First, you can let them pick out their own seeds and research the companions. So my kids love to go to Walmart or Lowe's or whatever and pick out seeds. You go and just let them pick out a couple packets, and they're going to come home and research the companions. Or maybe you let them think about it ahead of time and research before you go. Then you can let them pick out seeds that are companions if you want. You're going to start seeds 4 to 8 weeks before planting outside. So this really depends on the seed. Some of them you only start shortly before they go outside, or you start them directly outside. The next thing you can do is let them have their own garden for their plants. My kids love to have their own garden. Sometimes my husband will make like a 4x4 bed, or we'll give them a corner of a flower bed, or we'll give them a corner of the main garden. They just like to have their own place where they can put their own plants. One year I was walking between my patio and the driveway, and my son said, "Don't step on that. That's my garden." It's like this strip of dirt that's like that wide, and it has like grass in it, but there were these weird leaves in it. And I was like, "This is your garden?" I mean, it's like 8 inches wide. And it looked like a weed, but then I reached down and pulled it up, and it was radishes. He had like stuck seeds in there, and they had grown in this really terrible soil. So they love to have their own garden where they're kind of observing how things work out. And then you can do some experiments with planting. Plant some seeds with their companions and some without. I kind of did this year, not companion planting, but just trying to figure out what would help my tomatoes grow. So I planted some in the ground, some in raised beds, some in pots, some in good soil, some in not good soil, some in direct sun, some with less sun. And I really got to see that, in fact, it's worth it to plant them in good, rich soil in a lot of direct sun. Those were the most productive. My other experiments did not work very well, but for some reason I wanted to try it, and that was good. I'm glad I did. All right. Now, there are some bonus resources with this training, with this video. First, you can get a PDF copy of today's presentation. There's lots of notes in there, and that will be helpful just to refresh your memory as you're glancing through it. Second, there's a companion planting guide. It's also included that has the steps to begin with companion planting, as well as a handy chart that I mentioned that explains which plant families can usually be planted together. And then the last thing is, in the back of that companion planting guide, there is a coupon for 50% off the garden planner. If you are like me and you like to have organizational tools with everything all laid out, it's very inexpensive, makes it easy to use. That coupon is in there, as well as a link to where you can get that. All right. Well, I hope this has been helpful for you today. I know when I began learning about companion planting, it certainly explained a lot of my successes and failures. Um, I have gardened for many, many years, but I think I just kind of glazed over when it came to companion planting because it seemed really complicated. And when I started learning about it, I realized like it is complicated, but because so many of the families actually have similar properties, it's not that difficult, especially when you narrow it down to your favorites and you're really only trying to grow things that you want to eat anyway. So I hope this has been helpful. I've certainly enjoyed preparing and sharing it with you, and I hope to see you again next time.